Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My ex and I split when my youngest was just 2, and it's been me and my 2 kids ever since. I work as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling long shifts, so weekends are sacred in our house. That's our time to just be together, do normal stuff, and let the kids be kids. Sundays usually mean the park. It's free, the kids love it, and honestly, it gives me a chance to just sit and breathe for a minute while they burn off energy. My older one is 7, my younger one is 5, and they're at that age where they'll befriend literally anyone within a 10-foot radius, which is exactly what happened that day. We've been at the park maybe 20 minutes. My kids were on the swings with a couple other children, laughing and seeing who could swing higher. I was sitting on a bench nearby, drinking terrible coffee from a thermos and just watching them be happy. That's when she showed up. This woman came walking toward me like she was on a mission. Designer sunglasses, that haircut, the whole package. She got my attention pretty rudely and I looked up to see what she wanted. I greeted her casually and asked what was up. She immediately demanded to know why my kids were playing with those kids. I was confused. I looked over at the swings where the kids were just swinging and being kids. I told her they were just making friends, because that's what kids do. But she insisted that they shouldn't be playing with those kids. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what she meant and I didn't like it one bit. The other kids on the swings were a different race than mine. That was literally the only difference. I asked her to excuse me, not believing what I was hearing. She went on to say she didn't want her precious angels associating with those kinds of people. She actually told me I needed to make my kids stop playing with them. I felt my jaw clench. I've dealt with a lot in my line of work. Rude patients, demanding family members, doctors who think they're God. But this was something else entirely. I told her my kids could play with whoever they wanted and that we were all just having fun here. She said she wouldn't stand for it and that I needed to control my kids. I told her I wasn't the playground police and that they were just being kids. She huffed and walked off. I went back to watching my kids, who were now playing tag with their new friends. They were having the time of their lives, completely oblivious to the drama. About 15 minutes later, Karen came back, and she brought backup. She'd found the park security guard and was telling him that these kids were harassing her children. She demanded that he do something about it. The park security guard looked tired already. Poor guy probably dealt with this kind of thing more than he wanted to. He told everyone to calm down and asked what the problem was. Karen launched into this whole story about how my kids were being disruptive and bothering her children and causing all kinds of trouble. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for my turn. I explained to the officer that all they were doing was playing with the other kids and that there was nothing wrong with that. The security guard looked at the kids, who were now on the slide, taking turns and laughing. Then he looked at Karen. He told her that they were just kids having fun and that there was no issue here. Karen said this was unacceptable. She actually demanded that he arrest me for allowing my kids to associate with those troublemakers. The security guard looked genuinely confused. He told her he couldn't arrest someone for letting their kids play at the park. But Karen wasn't done. She started going off about bad influences and how she wouldn't tolerate this kind of behavior and how the park was going downhill. Some of the things she said made my blood boil, but I tried to keep my cool. I told her to let it go and that we were just here to enjoy the day. Karen announced that she was calling the police herself. The security guard just shrugged, clearly done with this conversation. He told her she was free to call the police if she wanted, but that there was no crime here. She whipped out her phone and started dialing. I rolled my eyes and went back to keeping an eye on my kids, who thankfully were still playing and hadn't noticed any of this. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers showed up. I explained everything from the beginning. How Karen didn't like who my kids were playing with, how she demanded arrests, how the security guard already said there was no problem. The officer said we should all go talk to this lady. We all walked over to Karen, who looked way too pleased with herself. The officer told her they'd heard there was a disturbance. She said yes. Finally, someone who takes things seriously. She claimed these kids were causing trouble and that I wouldn't do anything about it. The officer looked at me. I explained that my kids were just playing like every other kid there and that I didn't know what her deal was. The officer told everyone to calm down and asked what the issue was. Karen went off again. Same speech, same complaints, same thinly veiled bigotry. The officer listened, then turned back to me. I gave him my side again. The officer told Karen he was sorry, but there was no crime here. He said kids playing at the park wasn't a disturbance. Karen asked if he was kidding her and said he was just as useless as the security guard. The officer asked her to lower her voice and said they weren't there to arrest anyone for playing at the park. That's when Karen really lost it. She started screaming about how the world was falling apart and nobody respected her and society was doomed. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Karen said fine, if they wouldn't do anything, she'd take matters into her own hands. She walked off again. But no. About 20 minutes later, sirens. More police officers showed up and Karen was pointing at me like I'd committed murder. The new officer said they'd received a call about a disturbance. The first officer explained everything to the new arrivals. They looked at Karen like she'd grown a second head. The new officer asked her if she'd called the police on herself. She said yes because nobody else would do anything about these delinquents. The officer asked the first officer if this was true. The first officer confirmed that no, there was no crime here, just kids playing at the park. Karen said that if they wouldn't arrest me, then they should arrest her. The officers exchanged looks. I could see them trying not to laugh. The officer told her they couldn't just arrest someone for no reason. Karen said this was outrageous and that she demanded justice. I was biting my cheek so hard I thought I'd draw blood. This was insane. The officer told her that if there was no crime, there was nothing they could do. He asked her to please let everyone enjoy their day at the park. Karen huffed off dramatically. I started packing up our stuff ready to just go home and forget this whole nightmare. But then I saw her talking to yet another group of officers who'd just arrived. She was pointing at me and my kids again. The officers came over. They said they needed to talk to me. I asked what for, saying I hadn't done anything. The officer said the complaint alleged that I was causing a disturbance and refusing to comply with park rules. I explained everything again. The officer took statements from me, from Karen, from other people at the park who'd seen the whole thing. Finally, after what felt like forever, they huddled up to talk. The officer told me that after reviewing the statements, it was clear there was no merit to the complaint. He said I was free to go. I thanked them, grabbed my kids, and got out of there fast. A few days later, Karen had escalated things even more. She'd been going around the neighborhood complaining about the kids she didn't like. She even went to the local school trying to get the principal to ban certain children from attending. The community wasn't having it. People started speaking up, defending everyone's right to use public spaces. The school dismissed her complaints immediately. But here's where it gets good. During one of her neighborhood rants, Karen made some explicitly racist comments. Someone recorded the whole thing and turned it over to the police. She got arrested for hate speech and disturbing the peace. So yeah, Karen tried to police who my kids could play with at a public park and ended up getting herself arrested instead. My ex-wife and I share custody of our 8-year-old son. It's worked out pretty well, all things considered. We have this calendar system where we trade off weeks, and around holidays we extend things a bit so one of us gets more consecutive time. It's not perfect, but it's functional. This December we had already worked out the schedule. My ex was supposed to have our son for the first half of the month because she was planning to visit her significant other's family back in his home state for Christmas. I was totally fine with that. I wasn't planning anything fancy, just a quiet Christmas at home with my kid. Maybe some hot chocolate, movies, the usual stuff we do together. Then this week I got a call from my ex. She told me she needed to talk about the December schedule. I was confused because we'd already agreed on everything. She explained that something had come up and that her partner wanted to take them on a skiing trip for Christmas. She said it would be the last 2 weeks of December. I sat there processing what she just said. I asked her to clarify because I wanted to make sure I understood. She already had him for 2 weeks at the beginning of the month, and now she wanted another 2 weeks at the end. She confirmed that, yes, that was what she was asking for. She added that it was a really special opportunity and that he'd never been skiing before. I asked her where that left me, pointing out that I wouldn't get to see him at all for Christmas. She said we could talk about making it up afterwards. That's when something snapped in me. I was tired of always being the flexible one, the one who adjusted, the one who made things work while she got to do whatever she wanted. I told her no, we couldn't just talk about it afterwards. That wasn't how this worked. I said I had a proposal. I told her to give me money up front so he and I could take a summer vacation to make up for this lost time. She asked if I was serious and said that was outrageous. I shot back that what was outrageous was her asking me to give up my Christmas with our son and expecting me to just trust that she'd make it up to me later. I explained that she wanted me to give something up right now, so I wanted something concrete in return right now, not promises. She said this was ridiculous and that she couldn't believe I was being this petty. I insisted I wasn't being petty but trying to be fair. I said if she wanted to change our agreement, there needed to be something on the table for me too. I also mentioned that I'd be totally willing to negotiate properly if she asked nicely instead of just expecting me to roll over. That's when she hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone feeling angry, but also kinda justified. She was asking me to sacrifice my time with our son, time I've been looking forward to, and offering me nothing but vague promises of figuring it out later. But then, the comments started rolling in when I posted about this online. People were calling me names, saying I was using my kid as a bargaining chip, that I only cared about money instead of my son's happiness. One person wrote that I should have asked my son what he wanted instead of assuming. Another said I was denying him a great experience just to stick it to my ex. Someone else suggested that I could have him from now until the trip, then let him go skiing for the last 2 weeks and we could work out the makeup time later. I sat there reading these comments, and honestly, they made me feel worse. Maybe I hadn't thought this through. I assumed my son would rather spend Christmas doing our usual stuff, having his friends over for sleepovers, going on play dates in the neighborhood. That's what we always do and he loves it. But I never actually asked him. I called my ex back the next day. I told her I shouldn't have been so confrontational and that I've been thinking about this. She asked me what I meant. I asked her if she'd even talked to our son about whether he wanted to go skiing. There was a long pause. She admitted that she was going to ask him once we had it figured out between us. I pointed out that neither of us had actually asked him what he wanted. I suggested we start there. We agreed to sit down with our son together that evening. When we asked him about the skiing trip, his face lit up. He asked if it was real, if he could really go skiing. He said it sounded amazing. Then he looked at me with those big eyes. He asked me what about our Christmas plans. I told him we could do our stuff before he went, and that what was important was that he got to have fun. My ex chimed in and assured him we'd make sure I got extra time with him in January to make up for it. My son hugged both of us, completely unaware of the fight we'd had about him. When I watched him run off to his room, excited about the trip, I realized those commenters were right. I had made this about winning against my ex instead of about what was best for my kid. The vacation money demand was petty, a way to hurt her because I felt hurt. I've been so focused on keeping score that I forgot who really mattered here. My ex and I worked out a new schedule. I got him for 3 weeks in January instead of the usual split, and she didn't even argue about it. Turns out when you actually talk like adults instead of keeping score, things work better. I was 16 when I got my first real job as a cashier at a convenience store. The training was pretty straightforward. Most of it was common sense stuff about operating the register and being polite to customers, but they were really serious about one thing in particular, checking identification for cigarettes and alcohol. The manager drilled it into our heads during orientation. If someone looked under 35, we had to card them. No exceptions. If we sold to a minor and got caught by the secret shoppers the company sent around, we'd be fired on the spot. If it was an undercover regulatory agent, we could actually be arrested. They showed us this video of a cashier getting led away in handcuffs, and that was enough for me. There was no way I was risking my future over a pack of cigarettes. So I carded everyone, and I mean everyone. If you looked even remotely close to 35, I was asking for your driver's license. Most people were totally cool about it. They'd pull out their wallets, hand it over, maybe even joke about being flattered that I thought they could be under 35. Easy transaction. Everyone happy. But then there were the difficult ones. She first came in on a Tuesday evening. She looked like she was in her late 40s, dressed nicely, and had this air about her like she expected the world to move out of her way. She grabbed a pack of cigarettes and put them on the counter. I told her I needed to see her driver's license. She asked if I was kidding and whether I really thought she looked underage. I explained it was store policy and that I had to check identification for anyone purchasing tobacco products. She said she didn't have her license with her, her voice getting sharper. I apologized but told her I couldn't complete the sale without seeing identification. She demanded to know where my manager was and called the whole thing absurd. I stayed calm and told her I understood it was frustrating, but I couldn't break store policy. I said if she wanted to go get her license, I'd be happy to help her when she came back. She stared at me like I'd just insulted her entire family, then huffed and walked out without another word. I figured that was it. But nope, she came back the next week. Same thing, no identification, same conversation, same dramatic exit. This happened 3 or 4 times over the next month. Same woman, same cigarettes, same refusal to bring her license, same tantrum. The 4th time she demanded to see my manager before I even finished asking for her identification. My manager came over and she launched into this whole speech about how disrespectful I was being, how she'd been a loyal customer for years, and how it was obvious she was old enough to buy cigarettes. My manager looked tired like he'd dealt with this type of thing 100 times before. He told me to take my break and he'd handle it. When I came back from break, the cigarettes were gone and so was she. My manager didn't say anything about it, so I assumed he'd checked her identification and everything was fine. The following week she walked in again. I was at my register when she approached with her cigarettes. I asked for her driver's license. She asked if I was serious. She said my manager had already approved her last week. I told her I still needed to see her identification. She raised her voice and said this was harassment, that she'd already shown her identification to my manager. I explained that she'd shown it to him, not to me, and that I needed to verify it myself. She accused me of doing this on purpose and targeting her. I kept my voice steady and told her I was just following store policy. I explained that every cashier had to verify identification themselves, and that I couldn't assume someone else did the check. She told me to get my manager immediately. My manager came over again, looking even more exhausted than last time. She went off about how I was harassing her and refusing to sell to her even though she'd already proven her age to him. He looked at me and I could tell he was trying to figure out if this was worth the fight. He asked me why I was still asking for identification. I explained that I hadn't seen it myself yet. I told him company policy said each employee had to verify the identification personally and that I couldn't just assume someone else checked it. I reminded him that if a secret shopper came through or an agent tested me and I sold without checking myself, I'd be fired or arrested. I said I had to see it with my own eyes. My manager opened his mouth like he was going to argue, then closed it. He knew I was right. The policy was clear. He completed her purchase himself and she left, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. But she kept coming back. Week after week she'd come to my register, try to buy cigarettes without identification, and I'd refuse. Every single time, she'd yell, she'd complain, she'd get my manager, but I never saw her driver's license. Not once. And since I never saw it, I never sold to her. This went on for months. I kept my ground every single time. The other cashiers thought it was hilarious. One of them told me they'd seen her outside in the parking lot, getting into a brand new BMW sports car. So it wasn't like she couldn't afford to keep her license in her purse. She just didn't think the rules applied to her. Eventually, I moved away for college and left that job behind. I worked there for about 6 months total, and in all that time I never once saw her identification. She probably finally started bringing it for the other cashiers. Or maybe she just started shopping somewhere else. Either way, she never got those cigarettes from me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching. and see you next time.